You're a pauper and we don't need you." These cruel words, thrown at me by my only son, Cyril, still burn in my ears. He, my boy, whom I raised alone, personally threw me, his mother, out the door in an old coat, not even letting me gather my things. The door slammed shut with a deafening click, cutting me off from everything that was my life. And behind the door, I could almost hear the gloating, triumphant smile of his wife, Alina. They thought they had broken me, that I, humiliated and shattered, would go begging to acquaintances. But they didn't know the main thing. Just a day before this humiliation, a single phone call completely changed my entire life, and my response was already preparing to plunge them into the deepest shock. My life has never been easy. My husband left us when Cyril was only 5 years old, and since then, I've carried everything on my own. 2 jobs, sleepless nights, darned pantyhose, and an old coat that I wore for 10 winters in a row. Everything, every penny, every breath, was for him, my son. I dreamed that he would have everything that I didn't. A good education, a decent life, his own family, and his own home. And I achieved it. When Cyril married Alina, I unhesitatingly made perhaps the most important decision of my life. I sold my spacious, bright 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet, green neighborhood where I had lived for almost 30 years. With the proceeds and some savings, I bought them a chic 3-bedroom apartment in a new building with a large balcony and new plumbing. Everything Alina dreamed of. For myself, I took their old 1-bedroom apartment on the very outskirts of the city with windows overlooking a dusty road and factory pipes. I didn't regret anything. A mother's heart is ready for any sacrifice. At first, everything was fine. I moved in with them to help with my newborn grandson, Timmy. Alina didn't want to stay on maternity leave, and I took care of everything. I cooked, washed, cleaned their huge apartment, and walked with the baby in any weather. Alina was doing fitness, beauty salons, and meeting friends in cafes. I gave almost all of my modest pension to them for family needs, leaving myself mere pennies for transportation and the cheapest medicines. Cyril worked and earned well, but Alina was never satisfied. New dresses, expensive cosmetics, the latest phone model. Her appetites grew every day. I didn't grumble. I was happy to see that my son was living in prosperity, that he had a beautiful wife and a healthy child. It seemed to me that my mission had been accomplished. How wrong I was. Gradually, I began to notice changes. At first, it was small things. Alina's heavy sigh when I entered the kitchen, an irritated tone when I asked Cyril to help carry heavy bags from the store. Then reproaches began. "Mom, you smell like medicine. Air out your room," Alina would say, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "Agnes, are you wearing that old dress again? Don't embarrass us in front of guests." My room, which they had given me, was the smallest, without a window, more like a storage room, but I didn't pay attention to that either. The most painful thing was how Cyril was changing, my boy who couldn't fall asleep without me as a child, who always said that I was the best mom in the world. At first, he tried to protect me. "Alina, don't talk to Mom like that," he would occasionally check his wife. But her influence was too strong. She constantly complained to him in the evenings that she was tired of my presence, that I was bothering her, that I was of no use except for the pension. And gradually Cyril gave up. His defense was replaced by a dull irritation. "Mom, don't interfere. Alina and I are resting. Mom, can you be quieter? Why did you buy this again? You're just wasting money." He stopped looking me in the eyes. I became part of the interior for him. Old, annoying furniture that had long needed to be thrown away. The last straw that broke their patience was a ridiculous and tragic incident. That evening, as usual, I prepared dinner for the whole family and was carrying plates on a tray to the living room. Alina had just returned from the store, boasting about another purchase, a tall floor vase from some fashionable designer that cost as much as 2 of my pensions. She put it right in the middle of the hallway. My grandson, Timmy, playing, ran out of his room and ran into me at full speed. I staggered, the tray tilted, and 1 plate of hot soup flew straight onto that ill-fated vase. The sound of breaking glass sounded like a gunshot. Alina ran out to the sound with a face distorted with rage. She didn't even ask if I was scalded. She only cared about the vase. "What have you done? You're always ruining everything, you clumsy old woman," she shouted, and undisguised hatred splashed in her eyes. I stood, stunned with horror and resentment, and only mumbled, "Alina, I'm sorry, it was an accident." Timmy pushed me. At that moment, Cyril, tired from work, returned home. Alina immediately rushed to him with sobs, pointing to the shards. "She broke my vase. Your mother broke it. I can't live with her in the same house anymore. Either me or her." I looked at my son, at his face distorted with anger, and a faint hope still glowed in my soul. I waited for him to hug me now, calm his wife, and say that it was just a thing. But he looked at me with a cold, alien gaze, the gaze with which they look at an enemy. He came up to me, roughly grabbed my elbow, and dragged me to the exit. "I'm tired of you," he hissed in my face. "Tired of your eternal problems and your pauper appearance. You are a pauper, and we don't need you. Get out." He pushed me out onto the landing and slammed the door. I remained standing in the deafening silence of the entrance, in an old housecoat and slippers. The world collapsed, so sick that I couldn't even breathe. I slid down the cold wall and sat on the dusty steps. Tears flowed down my cheeks, but I didn't notice them. My old button phone vibrated in the pocket of my robe. With trembling hands, I took it out. The screen showed one missed call, one new message. The number was unfamiliar to me. I opened the message, mechanically running my eyes over the lines. And suddenly the tears instantly dried up, and my eyes widened with absolute, incredible amazement. I caught my breath, and in my chest, instead of icy emptiness, a red-hot ember of hope and anticipation beat. The text on the phone screen was dry and official, but every word in it exploded in my mind like a firework. The message read, "An inheritance has been opened in your name from your second cousin. Please contact the notary as soon as possible to clarify the details." Below was the phone number and address of the notary's office. Uncle Frederick, I had almost forgotten about his existence. My mother's cousin, who left for the north in his youth, was engaged in geology and, as they said, made a decent fortune there. We haven't seen each other for 40 years. He was lonely, childless. And frankly, I thought he had been dead for a long time. And now, an inheritance. At that moment, sitting on the cold steps of the entrance where my own son had just humiliated me, I didn't yet know the extent of this inheritance. But this news itself, which came in the darkest hour of my life, was like a miracle, as if God himself had extended a helping hand to me. I sat reading the message over and over again, and suddenly I felt something switch inside me. The icy shell of resentment cracked, and a cold, ringing fury came in its place. Not at my son, no, at myself, at my blind, stupid, sacrificial love, which allowed them to turn me into a free servant and a speechless slave. I lived so many years for him, denying myself everything, and he erased me from his life for a broken vase. Well, if they don't need me, then so be it. I got to my feet, my back straightened, and a confident, steely glint appeared in my eyes, which hadn't been there for many years. I went down the stairs, went outside, and caught a taxi for the first time in 10 years. To Maple Street, number 5, I said in a firm voice to the driver, giving the address of my small, abandoned, but my own apartment. The key turned with difficulty in the rusted lock. The apartment met me with a smell of dust and desolation. I hadn't been here for several months. A thin layer of dust covered the old furniture. A cobweb hung in the corner, but it was my home, my fortress. I turned on the light, and a dim light illuminated the modest furnishings. I sat on the old sofa and only then gave free rein to tears. But these were already different tears, not tears of humiliation, but tears of farewell to a past life. I mourned not the cruelty of my son, but my own blindness. While I was crying, I took out my phone and dialed the notary's number. A pleasant male voice answered me. I introduced myself, and at the other end of the line, they seemed to be glad. "Agnes, you've finally been found. We've been looking for you for a week. Your Uncle Frederick, unfortunately, passed away a month ago. He left you his entire fortune. You are his only heir. You need to come as soon as possible to complete the documents." I listened, and the ground was slipping from under my feet. A fortune? What kind of fortune? My uncle was never close to our family. The notary, feeling my confusion, continued. "Agnes, Frederick was a very wealthy man. We're talking about a large sum in bank accounts, shares of several mining companies, and a 3-bedroom apartment in downtown Manhattan." I could hardly hear the last words. There was a buzz in my ears. The pauper Agnes, who had just been kicked out for a broken vase, turned out to be the heir to millions. It was like a bad dream. I thanked the notary and promised to come the next day. Hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at one point. In my head, slowly but surely, a plan was ripening. A plan for a new life and a plan for a small but fair revenge. First of all, I called my only friend, Vera. We had been friends since youth, but in recent years we had rarely seen each other. I was too busy with my son's family problems. Vera, listening to my rambling story without asking unnecessary questions, rushed over half an hour later with bags full of food and a bottle of wine. "You've finally seen the light, Lita," she said, hugging me. "I told you 100 times that you're Cyril, and this Alina of his would sit on your neck. Well, it's better late than never." That night, we talked until morning. Vera helped me recover, instilled confidence, and most importantly, helped me make a clear plan of action. She was a businesslike and level-headed woman, and her advice was invaluable. The next morning, having slept for the first time in many years on my own sofa, I woke up a different person. I put on the only decent dress that was stored in the old closet and went to the notary's office. The meeting with the notary was like in a fog. Papers were laid out in front of me. Some unthinkable numbers were called out, which made my head spin. I signed documents, almost without delving into their essence, fully trusting the words of the notary and the advice of Vera. When I left his office, I had documents in my hands confirming my right to the inheritance and the keys to my uncle's Manhattan apartment. And through the bank, I gained access to his accounts. The amount that I saw on the ATM screen made me grab the wall, so as not to fall. My past life, where I counted pennies for bread, now seemed like a distant nightmare. First of all, I withdrew a small amount of cash. Then, on the advice of Vera, I hired a good lawyer specializing in family law. I explained to him the situation with the apartment that I bought for my son. The lawyer, after studying the documents, reassured me. "Since the apartment was bought with money from the sale of your personal property and registered in your name, and you only later transferred it to the use of your son and his family, it will not be difficult to return it. We will file a lawsuit for eviction on the grounds that you, as the owner, no longer wish to grant them the right to reside." It was exactly what I wanted to hear. The next few days were spent in pleasant chores. I bought myself new clothes, changing my old coat for an elegant cashmere one and trampled boots for comfortable leather shoes. I went to the hairdresser and got a haircut that I had dreamed of for a long time. Looking at my reflection in the store window, I saw not a downtrodden old woman but a confident, attractive woman. But the most important acquisition awaited me at the car dealership. I had never driven a car in my life, but now I felt like I could do anything. I chose a non-flashy but reliable and comfortable dark Sherry crossover. The hired instructor taught me the basics of driving in just a few days on an empty test track. And then the day came when I decided to visit my son. I got behind the wheel of my new car, started the engine, and slowly drove onto the road. I drove slowly, enjoying the silence in the cabin and the feeling of complete control over my life. I was driving to the house from which I had been kicked out just a week ago. But now I was returning there not to ask for forgiveness, but to dictate my terms. I parked my shiny cherry crossover right at the entrance, in the very place where Cyril usually parked his car. The morning was overcast, but it seemed to me that the sun was shining. I didn't get out right away, but just sat in the warm cabin, looking at the windows of the apartment on the 3rd floor. That very apartment that was my home and my humiliation. I was waiting. I knew that Cyril would soon have to go to work. No more than 10 minutes passed, and the entrance door opened. My son appeared on the threshold. He was in a good mood, whistling something to himself and twirling the keys to his car on his fingers. Seeing an unfamiliar expensive car in his place, he frowned. He walked around it, examining it with undisguised curiosity, and was already going to shout something indignantly when at that moment I smoothly lowered the tinted side window. Cyril froze on the spot, as if rooted. His mouth opened in amazement. For a few seconds, he just stared at me silently, unable to believe his eyes. At me, in an elegant coat, with neat styling, sitting behind the wheel of a new foreign car. His face changed every second. Surprise was replaced by bewilderment and then confusion. "Mom, where are you from? What is this?" he stammered, pointing to the car. I looked at him calmly, without anger, but without the former love in my eyes. "Hello, Cyril," I said in an even voice. "Don't be surprised. Anything happens in life. Sometimes those who you think are paupers turn out to be not so poor." At that moment, a breathless Alina ran out of the entrance. "Cyril, why are you standing still? We're late." "Oh." She broke off in mid-sentence, seeing me. Her eyes darted from my face to the car, then back to me, and her face reflected a whole range of feelings: shock, envy, and poorly concealed fear. "Agnes," she whispered. I didn't deign to answer her. My whole conversation was addressed to my son. "I didn't come here to argue," I continued firmly. "I came to tell you the news. My lawyer is filing a lawsuit today to evict you from this apartment." I uttered the last words clearly, looking Cyril straight in the eye. He turned pale. Alina gasped and grabbed his hand. What? What eviction? You can't? This is our apartment," she shouted hysterically. "You're wrong, darling Alina," I calmly parried. "This apartment is mine. I bought it with my own money, and I am its owner. And you just lived here with my permission. But my permission ended that evening when you kicked me out the door. You have a month to find yourself a new home and move out. 30 days. After that, other people will live here." Cyril finally found his voice. "Mom, you can't do this to us. We have Timmy, your grandson. Where will we go?" Despair and belated fear sounded in his voice. "You should have thought about your grandson earlier," I snapped. "When you were pushing your own mother onto the landing. And where will you go? These are no longer my problems. You can rent an apartment or go live with Alina's parents. You're an adult man, Cyril, and you must be responsible for your actions and for your family." I saw tears glistening in his eyes. But these were not tears of repentance. They were tears of resentment and helplessness. He suddenly fell to his knees right on the wet asphalt. "Mom, forgive me, you fool. It's all Alina. She turned me against you. I was wrong. Forgive me." He tried to grab my hand, but I moved away. Alina watched the scene with rage and hatred, now directed not only at me, but also at her traitor husband. I didn't feel sorry for him. All my pity and love burned out that evening on the cold staircase. "Your apologies are belated, son. Get up and don't embarrass yourself. My decision is final and not subject to appeal. In exactly 1 month, I will come with bailiffs, and I advise you to pack your things by then." With these words, I raised the glass, turned on the transmission, and slowly drove away, leaving them standing in the middle of the yard, confused, humiliated, and frightened. In the rearview mirror, I saw Alina shouting something furiously at Cyril, and he was sitting on his knees, grabbing his head with his hands. For the first time in many years, I felt not pain but relief. It was as if a heavy, long-term burden had fallen from my shoulders. The following month, they tried to put pressure on me, called 100 times a day, begged, threatened, and tried to put pressure on Pity through mutual acquaintances. But I changed my phone number and communicated with them exclusively through a lawyer. Exactly 30 days later, as promised, I came to my apartment. I was accompanied by a lawyer and 2 strong men from the security agency, whom I hired just in case. The apartment was empty. They moved out, leaving behind perfect order, as if trying to somehow atone for their guilt. I entered the empty, echoing rooms, and my soul was calm and bright. I did a good renovation in the apartment, bought new comfortable furniture, and then sold it. And I also sold my uncle's Manhattan apartment. With the proceeds, I bought myself a large, cozy house in a quiet country village with a garden and a small terrace, which I had always dreamed of. My life was filled with new colors. I signed up for landscape design courses, read a lot, traveled to small towns in our country, and met with my friend Vera. I learned to live for myself. Sometimes I thought about my son and grandson. Did I feel guilty? No, I gave my son everything I could, and even more. I gave him education, a start in life, a roof over his head, but I could not give him the main thing: conscience and soul. It was his choice. About a year later, Vera called me. Lita, you won't believe it. I saw your ex-daughter-in-law, Alina. She divorced Cyril. She found herself an older and richer man, and Cyril was left with nothing. He now lives with Alina's parents in their cramped two-room apartment and works as a simple manager. They say he drinks a lot. I listened to this news without gloating, but without regret. Everyone got what they deserved. Several more years passed. I found peace and harmony. My garden was blooming, and the house always smelled of fresh pastries. One day, there was a knock at the door. Cyril stood on the doorstep, aged, haggard, with guilty eyes. Next to him stood a grown-up Timmy. My heart leaped. Mom, hello, Cyril said quietly. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I came not to ask but just to get to know you again, if you allow it. And I want Timmy to know his grandmother. I looked at him for a long time, at my son, and then turned my gaze to my grandson, who was curiously examining me. And I realized that I could forgive. Not forget, but forgive. I opened the door wider and said, Come in. The kettle had just boiled. This was the beginning of a new, complex, but, I believe, happy page in our story. Thank you for listening to my story to the very end. It was very difficult for me, but I am glad that I was able to share it with you. If it resonated in your soul, please like it, write your comment, and subscribe to our channel.